Now, PFAS, which is an acronym, PFAS, these are chemicals that have been used as firefighting materials. They have contaminated groundwater in a number of facilities right around Australia. Here in Perth, there are big concerns up around Bullsbrook at the RAF base. There are also concerns at Perth Airport. And there have been local residents who have expressed their concerns over the years about PFAS in water supplies. Even Erin Brockovich, the famed United States activist who the movie was made about, she has weighed in on this issue as well. There's been EPA investigations. There have been all sorts of concerns. The worry is that these things will be difficult to ever get out of the ground. The expense of the remediation is something that will probably have to be borne by the Commonwealth Government in large part, but there hasn't really been a clear way forward on what to do. My next guest is the managing director of a company called OLEOLOGY, and he thinks they may have a technological engineering solution that can contribute to this problem being cleaned up. Paul Callaghan is his name. G'day, Paul.
G'day, Gareth.
Thanks for your time. Just tell the brief story of what PFAS actually is.
Well, the brief story is a long one, actually, but in part to try and get to the nub of it, it's a range of chemical products that are man-made. They have a very long life. They're about 40 to 90 years. They're pretty much invisible in water. You can't see them, and at very low levels, they're proven to be harmful to mankind and the environment. Cancers and endocrine disruptors, interrupting fertility rates in both animals and humans are some of the outcomes of exposure to these chemicals.
What are they? How did they end up in the environment?
Well, they come from a whole range of areas. So everything we do, we end up, the wastes end up in dumps, or water that's treated from industry ends up in sewer systems. That then gets treated, and we all live on the coast in Australia, so all that's treated water from sewage systems ends up back in the ocean, in the harbours, in the bay. So that ends up then getting into the fish. We at the end of the food chain end up eating them. So that's one form and one way that it ends up back in our system, sort of sitting in the liver and kidneys and other areas of the body, which gives rise to all these concerns about cancers of a whole range. And the other part that's really difficult about this is getting people to understand at what level these chemicals are dangerous. So they're rated and they're tested down to parts per trillion. That doesn't mean a lot to many people, but if you put one drop of a PFAS concentrate into an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that is not the level that we're talking about. We're talking about emptying and refilling that Olympic-sized swimming pool 1,000 times with that same one single drop of water, and that's the level to which these chemicals are dangerous.
Jeepers. That's seriously dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very, very low levels.
Yep.
And because it's completely clear, clean, you can't see it in water, you can't smell it, it's at that highly soluble end, which is really difficult to remove. The existing water treatment systems can't remove them. So they just go straight through. Okay,
so that brings us to the work that you and your company do.
Exactly. So we've worked away over the last 10 years of development to remove PFAS in its entirety. And so PFAS, so some people might be familiar with Teflon pans. And if you go and buy a new Teflon pan now and you look closely at the writing on the side of the box, you'll see it says PFOA free. Well, PFOA is one compound of the 6,000 odd that make up the whole family of PFAS compounds. So removing just PFOA is one thing, but you've got to remove all the others to be completely safe and sure. So that's what we've been able to do. We've developed a way to remove all those compounds from wastewater, from groundwater, because one of the other ways that gets into the environment, PFAS, is all the rubbish that we put into dumps. A lot of those products have got PFAS coatings on them.
Right, so it leaches out.
Yeah, leaches out with stormwater, runs off into the groundwater. The groundwater migrates below ground out to the river or to the ocean, and we start again. Or that groundwater is sitting underneath a paddock somewhere, and the grasses that are growing carry that PFAS with it. The animals eat it. We, at the end of the food chain, end up eating the animals, and again, we've ingested PFAS in various rates.
So how does your technique to start to remove some of this stuff work?
So we filter it out. So we filter it onto a filter, like a filter that you would find in a household and under bench sink.
Yep.
They're a little bit more complex than that and smarter chemistry. But we filter it onto that, and it chemically binds it onto the filter and won't release it. So we're then able to take that dry filter and ship it off to get it thermally oxidized, which is just burning it at high temperature, and that reduces forever, removes it forever from our environment, and it just turns it back into its natural elements, which are harmless.
So what needs to happen to get your solution deployed?
Well, we're working with government and the regulators. Keenly, we want to see it happen as soon as possible because of the length of time that these chemicals live in our environment. 40 to 90 years is their half-life. So we're working with government. We're working with the regulators out of government. We're even working with the US EPA to help them over there so that they understand that there is a technology that's available readily, which won't put business at risk because it's not financially too much of an encumbrance, and allows them to keep going in industry whilst we get clean water coming out of industrial operations or sewage treatment plants or out of leachate around waste facilities.
Are you getting the traction that you would hope for?
Things seem to take time. So that's a really good question. Over what period of time do you think we should really get the uptake to save the environment and reduce the risk of cancer and reduce fertility rates dropping in fish stocks and so forth? So in some parts of Australia, yes. In some parts of the US is interesting too, because they're actually going to regulate, and 6 states in the US now are moving to regulate, and by that I mean put in law by the middle of next year. So Australia was at the forefront, and there was a lot of work done, particularly here in Western Australia, where the first guidelines were put into place back in 2016. But now the US have they've leapfrogged us. They are making the legislation happen, which will force industry to adhere to the guidelines or the law that's put in place, force cleanups of sites that are contaminated, and it's all about protecting the community.
Yeah, okay. Well, we will wait and see where it goes, but I appreciate you explaining it to us this morning. Pleasure.
Thanks, Gareth.
Paul Callaghan, the Managing Director of OLEOLOGY, and I take what he says at face value. I hope that that is a solution, and if it is a solution, let's hope that it gets deployed ASAP, particularly for those people in Bullsbrook who, many of them, are still drinking bottled water. It is pretty interesting. I mean, the issue of PFAS, it has actually been the subject not only of all of that activity in Australia, but also of a Hollywood film starring Mark Ruffalo. It's called Dark Waters, and it's a case against the US chemical manufacturing corporation who contaminated a town with those PFOA chemicals. Take a listen.
How many did you lose?
190.
190 cows.
You tell me nothing's wrong here.
It's a small matter for a family friend. Help a guy who needs it.
The farmer or you? That's chemicals, I'm telling you.
I'm seeing documents I don't understand.
They're hiding something.
That chemical, what if you drank it?
Drank it? It's like saying, what if I swallowed a tire?
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
So there you go, Dark Waters. Same issue. It applies here in Western Australia too.